Hi, church family and neighbors wherever you may be. I'm Chris McLean, lead pastor at Shady Grove United Methodist Church, and it's my privilege to be with you today. I want to talk about sides and what we as Christians can do about sides, and I'd like to begin with a story. It's a story of my mother. Really, I've been blessed with more than one mother in life, and I won't give you that whole story, but I'll give you part of it. Part of it is that I have a mother who mothered me from the day I was 3 days old. I came home from the hospital and was placed in the care of a woman named Bernice because my parents were both active in the Navy Medical Corps, and Bernice, through her profession of caregiving, made it possible for my parents to continue their service in the Navy Medical Corps. Bernice is such a part of my life. She's a major reason that I'm probably in ministry. She knit a lot of creativity and care into me. Every time I give a hug, every time I listen at the end of a long day to my children or to anyone else, there's so much Bernice in that. Bernice was a mother to me, and we maintained a close and loving relationship until her death about 10 years ago. One of the key experiences I had growing up was an experience of amazing neighbors and really creative and fun experiences with neighbors where we all the kids just felt cared for by the neighbors around. One of those neighbors was Mr. G, and he had a dog that he used to walk around. We all enjoyed playing with his big dog. He usually walked his dog without a leash, but if the kids were nervous, he would call his dog over to him, and we knew that Mr. G was keeping an eye on us and on the dog, and that we would be well cared for. But when I was about 7 years old, I noticed that Mr. G, when he was coming by our house, and when Bernice, who was black, was outdoors, that Mr. G behaved very differently with the dog. And when the dog was coming up to Bernice and she was afraid and the dog became very persistent with her, that Mr. G turned his head away with a smile that I could see he knew what was going on, but allowed her discomfort and fear to continue. And we as 7-year-old kids were having to pull his dog off of Bernice and try to manage that situation. And it was easy for me to contrast that experience with other examples of people, like my school principal. My school principal treated Bernice as a true professional with great love for us. And I remember Bernice had made a Raggedy Ann doll, and then made me a matching dress. And I remember the principal celebrating that and seeing how much love Bernice had for us kids. And so I learned from an early age that not all of us have the same experience of one another. I think we all learned that at one time or another, but I learned that I had neighbors who would treat me with tremendous care, but that Bernice might not experience that same care. And that some of my neighbors I could count on to behave one way toward Bernice, and others I could not. And that was something that I had to spend a lot of years processing, knowing that I had a different experience of life with these white neighbors of mine than Bernice was able to have with them. There is a lot more to that story as I grew up and spent time with Bernice and her family in their home and vice versa. But I'll leave that story there. Also in my family, there are 5 police officers. One of those police officers is retired and deceased. Another one of those police officers is recently retired. 3 of them are active duty police officers in the South. Now about sides. I'm bringing up sides today because I tend to hear that crop up, and it's certainly cropping up in this time as we see the protests following the death of George Floyd. And there can be this tendency for us to take one another's temperature, to check what stories that we're telling what actions we're taking, what things we're forwarding on social media. And we look at that and we look at language and we try to figure out what side one another may be on. And what? Therefore decide whom we're not going to listen to. So I've told you my story. Whose side do you think I'm on? I have a side. I've taken the side of my family. And that includes all the persons that I've shared with you about so far today. In a similar way, we can understand about God and sides. Jesus has come to reconcile the world to himself. And where you see that is right in Jesus' side, his bleeding side. Listen to 2 Corinthians 5, verses 15 through 17. Jesus died for all, so that those who live might live no longer for themselves, but for him who died and was raised up for them. From now on, therefore, we regard no one from a human point of view. Maybe that's our normal way of handling sides. We don't regard anyone that way anymore. Even though we once knew Christ from a human point of view, we know him no longer that way. So if anyone is in Christ, there is a new creation. Everything old has passed away. See, everything has become new. Friends, if you find yourself wondering what side to be on during this time as a Christian, I want to suggest to you Jesus' side, his bleeding side. We're called to follow Christ. That means allowing ourselves to be broken open. There's that bleeding side, broken open for the healing of the world. Okay? And when we think about our world, we experience tremendous chaos. So here's the second part. I said I'd talk about sides, and then what can we do? There's tremendous chaos. And a friend of mine named Kelly used to say that what we can do is receive chaos and return calm and inspire hope. That's an important ministry. We can receive chaos, return calm, and inspire hope. But we can't, in that, behave as though chaos is only outside of us and we sit on some sort of placid, undisturbed area above everything somehow and just watch the chaos come up and then we can just nod our heads sagely. The chaos, it's in us. There's a thing called cumulative stress. There's whatever stress you had going on in your work, in your life, in your family, and things you were dealing with in yourself, and then coronavirus, and now we have what's happened with George Floyd and these questions around how we are going to understand and live out safety and policing in this country, and how we're going to understand our larger social relationships that are important to consider, that it's not just about relationships with police, it's about all larger relationships of trust. And so this is so huge. And this stress, it builds up, it accumulates, it's cumulative. And it gets harder and harder for us to manage. And so if we're honest, that chaos is in us where we feel overwhelmed. How can we own our own chaos and allow that to receive the calm it deserves? Perhaps allowing God's calm in your prayer life and being honest about your chaos is one way. Being in a relationship with others who can receive the turmoil you may be feeling. So I want to commend to you some of our Zoom groups that we have something every night of the week where you can be with a group who can listen and be calm for you, and you have the opportunity to be calm for the other. So that chaos is going to be in us, in our neighbors, in our families, in our society, wherever it may be. Can we honor the pain and the questions that are part of this work of reconciliation? God is trying to reconcile the world to God's self. This is part of it. And we are called to join in God's work and be used as ministers of reconciliation. That means that we abide in the chaos, seeking a calm that's not our own calm, but God's, that can listen and love and inspire hope, not our own hope. Our hope is too small, but God's hope. God's hope for that great reconciliation, that great someday when the wholeness that God intends is what emerges. So friends, as you may find yourself pulled between sides, I invite you to take the side of your family, God's human family, God's great someday that God cares for through Jesus' bleeding side. Choose that side. Receive chaos, even your own. With God's help, return calm and inspire a hope that's bigger than any one of us. Inspire God's hope. Have a great day. Blessings in it.